Welcome to Nickals and Dimes, the #1 podcast in combat sports. Today, we're thrilled to welcome the one and only Chael Sonnen to the show. He's known as the American Gangster. Chael is a legendary figure in combat sports. He's a former UFC middleweight and light heavyweight contender with unforgettable battles against some of the greatest fighters in history, including Anderson Silva and John Jones. Chael's gift for trash talk revolutionized the art of promotion in MMA. Now, as an analyst, podcast host, and all-around MMA ambassador, Chael continues to inspire fans worldwide with his insights and unmatched charisma. We're excited to dive into his career, his thoughts on the fight game, thoughts on the wrestling world, and so much more. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it.
Hey, Bo, you're up to speed that the finals tonight's going to be Ferrari versus Arnold?
Yes, I saw that. I don't know if, do you think are they going to wrestle?
Yeah, I guess this is they'll wrestle off. Like the whole reason the coach put them both in this tournament is to go figure out in front of everybody.
Wow. That's surprising. I don't know. I don't know about that. Ferrari still has the red shirt. Arnold's pretty good. So what happens if Ferrari beats him? Arnold's just a backup. He's pretty good to be a backup.
He's too good to be a backup. Why burn the guy's year? Hey, Iowa, those rumors that they were offering Gable $1 million and $1 million plus just to go to Big Tens and Nationals, those are true. Every single point matters to these guys. And yes, they will eat their own in Iowa, for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting culture. You know, I think obviously we're doing it very differently, but you can see that with like Glazier at 97 and Buchanan coming in, and it hasn't been working out for them. So it's surprising to me that they're still just like doing the same thing.
Yeah. No, I'm very curious by it. I mean, Gabe Arnold is as good as a wrestler needs to be at that level. Like, he is definitely a top 3 and 4 guy on any regular occasion. And then you bring this Ferrari in, who apparently is everything I just said and maybe even a little bit more. You realize, Bo, you can wrestle matches but still redshirt?
Right, 5 matches or something like that, I think. Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah, it's like 5 matches. I've been a little bit unclear on that rule, and I used to know every rule there was. This NIL has thrown me off completely. I still haven't recovered from COVID year, where guys are 6th and 7th years and.
Yeah, I think Anthony, you still have a year of eligibility.
A couple, actually. Yeah. 28.
Yeah, he got some eligibility back from that. But yeah,
wait a minute. Is this Tony Two Fingers? He's looking all lean. I just watched your show that they made on the Big Ten Network.
Oh, I appreciate it.
That whole thing. And great job on your MMA career. I believe you were at 2-0 now.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
It's a little bit of a surprise that they found 2 guys that had to step in there with you. Those guys deserve a lot of credit for that.
It only took 3 years, but I'm a little slim.
Only 2 fingers. Okay. Hey, come on back here. Big Ten fight. Hey, get on back here, game.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, sir.
You do look a little trimmer, though. I mean that as a compliment. You do look a little trimmer than I am. I thought you would be.
I put on and lost about 40 pounds in the span of 12 months. So I just had to.
It was a shoulder or it was a knee?
Shoulder. Yeah, I had 4 on the same shoulder.
Did you have enough? Did you? I know that happened at the National Open in Vegas, but did you have enough at that point? You won the NCAAs. Wasn't that your point? You were ready to move on, weren't you?
Nah, at that point, my next goal was the Olympics, and I was putting everything into that. And then I broke my shoulder at the Senior Nationals in 2020. So I was feeling really good up until then. I put another 10 pounds on, and I was ready to go. But that really set me back another 2 years. Then my goal was to get healthy and come back and fight and at least try that out. And my body was completely healthy. I had 2 fights, and then I went out on my terms. So that's kind of how I see it.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, but are you now done fighting? You said
I'm done. Yeah, I'm done now.
You're done.
Yep. Yeah, I'm in.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, I'm in real estate investing now, so I'm fully transitioned out.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
You're living the dream.
Yeah.
You go out and be done and then like be glad. You're living the dream, man.
Yeah, I love it. So I can't complain.
Yeah, he doesn't have to get punched in the head to make any money.
Yeah.
And by the way, why does Gable Steveson have another year? That has never been established, and we all chalked it up to that he had an Olympic year. We've all said that, but the NCAA never said that. We've never got an official answer on how they got him back in the door. Does anyone know for sure?
I think it was marketing purposes.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
That same way.
Yeah, they just.
I mean, that same way, and it was the right move. But I'm just saying, like, it's been 7 years or something. Really, I contacted the NCAA about this.
Really?
I contacted them to find out if they had approved an Olympic redshirt year for Gable Steveson. And they're supposed to tell me. This isn't like hidden news. And they got back to me. And they said, Chael, we cannot confirm for you. Had they made a ruling, they said that they would have had to tell me. But they listen to how they worded this. They said, Chael, we cannot confirm for you that there was ever an application turned in on Gable Stevenson's behalf for an Olympic redshirt year.
Wow.
So that's what brings me back to this question. How did we get to this mystery year that just popped up? And by the way, he would be eligible for an Olympic year, but you have to file that after the fact. And according to the NCAA, that paperwork was never turned in.
Interesting.
Wow.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think that, the way I've seen it work is if you're not Penn State, you pretty much can make it work for whatever you need to make happen because they want to make the sport more entertaining and competitive in some way. Because if we just win all 10 weights, then it's like, come on, what's the point? So I think they want to just maybe help build up the sport a little bit. I noticed a lot of these other programs, they get away with a lot of stuff that we don't. So it's hard to say exactly why.
Aaron Nickal, did he and Brayton Davis have an official wrestle-off anywhere?
There's a potential official wrestle off that happened. No. Actually, you know what? Now I'm getting confused. We've had a bunch of 133s this year, but there's not been a wrestle off between them yet.
Yeah, he's recovering from an injury.
Yeah, Nickal has an injury.
Oh, all right. Yeah. So as of now, this season, it's looking to move forward with Brayton as the guy.
Yeah. I think that if Nickal could get healthy, that they'll give him a shot, but he's not 100% right now.
I felt so bad for him. First off, he's a cute and sweet young guy. The reality is he's a hardened Big Ten champion. He's an adult. He's 18, but it didn't feel that way. When I saw him lose at Nationals when everybody else is cleaning house, and he was right there. I mean, Brayton was this close to being a national champion. Instead, he even gets pushed out the backside. It was so hard. Oh, my God, I felt so bad for him.
No, for sure.
He did look, that hurt him. That hurt him to see all the success that was going on around him.
Yeah.
And I hope that he does have a very good year this year.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see him because I feel like he's bounced back pretty well, just seeing him in training every day. And, I think he's made a lot of big improvements. He's obviously looking good the first part of this year. And, you see some guys that happens to them and they kind of shrink, they shrink back into their shell and they don't want to get back in there. But he was like one of the guys that I saw the most in the training room over the summer.
Yeah.
And I think he's made big improvements. And I think 133 is a good weight for him too. He was towards the end of the year just getting that was a lot of weight for him. So, I think he feels better at a higher weight. And yeah, I mean,
Sure.
I'm excited. I mean, he had I think he beat the number 4, 5, 6 guy from Little Rock.
Sorry, Bailey.
He beat Nasir Bailey, an All-American this past.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, he just beat him.
Nasir.
That
was like 2 weeks ago. Okay.
It was. Yeah, he beat him.
What about Crooklyn, Bo? I'm sorry to interrupt, but did he run into Crooklyn?
Crookham?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
He lost
it was
one takedown.
Yeah, it was a 4-2 or
4-1, 4-2, something like that. Real close. But yeah, that's a tough weight. All the weights are tough. They're all stacked. And I'm excited to see how it plays out. I mean, obviously you have Penn State kind of at the top, but it's been exciting to see, Oklahoma State, Ohio State, Iowa have a bunch of young guys in their lineups doing well. And I think the sport is so much better when there's just more variety. When you can have somebody there's a challenge, there's a team race, there's people, vying for the title. It's just more exciting. I think that the viewership has actually gone down in recent years, and I think that's in part because of how Penn State's dominated. But I'm hoping that we can get some people to compete with us moving forward.
There is such a battle right now. I mean, it is one of the most competitive things in all of college sport, the battle for second. Right. See, nobody cares. You can't get any headlines. But if you start arguing, well, if Ohio State does this and if Michigan gets these guys healed, look at what David Taylor's doing out in, it's really fascinating. I don't know who I think. The second team is. I know that people are saying that it's Iowa, but Iowa versus Oklahoma State in a dual meet right now, that's a very interesting matchup.
Mm-hmm. Do they wrestle this year? They wrestle a lot of years. I don't know if they
have to.
Yeah, they have to, right? Yeah, no,
yeah,
they
that's
have
like
to.
one of the oldest rivalries. I don't know when it is. I don't know what that date set. Kevin Dressler's been Iowa State all of a sudden is a player in a top 5 conversation. I feel like he did that pretty quick.
Yeah, they've been getting some good guys, some good recruits. They have an interesting Cuban connection. They've got a few quite a few Cuban guys. I know they're heavyweight.
Yep. Bastida.
They got Echemendia, and I think they got another Cuban guy as well. So there's some type of Cuban to Iowa State connection going on that these guys are doing pretty well.
Dresser just made a comment on that. And he go, I'm going to try to act it out like I'm him. Oh, yeah, it's great. You know, these guys are good wrestlers. They're not as good on bottom, and they don't listen as well because of the language. They get tired. Like he was trying to compliment, and he's just gonna fight it. But I do know what he means.
Right.
Like that Echemima is as dominant of a guy when he was coming through high school. I don't know that I'm fully convinced he was of high school age, but I remember Marco, man, he teched them all in both styles.
Yeah.
He could barely break a sweat and had like 20 matches in 1 week. He was really.
No, he definitely didn't look like a high school kid. You know, the birth certificates are always in question when you're dealing with Cubans and Russians, to be fair, as well. But
you guys want to know who I got huge compliments on? Yeah. I heard that Mark Hall, as a coach, that he is like going to come into his own. Like everything that he did, I'm told by people he will like go in a Hall of Fame for coaching. That he was one of the most involved, present. Gets athletes on his own, comes in, private time, actually cares.
I'm told,
like all the new guys that are coming out with these coaching gigs, allegedly Hall is amongst the best of all of them.
I believe that.
Is he a Penn?
He was. Now he's at Oklahoma. He's at Oklahoma now.
He is?
Yeah. So right after the Olympic trials this past summer, he's at Oklahoma. And you know what's interesting is he actually took the director of operations position at Oklahoma, but new rule change for this year. It used to be if you were director of operations, you could not wrestle with the team. No coaching, nothing. You only did operations. Now, if you're director of operations, you're allowed to wrestle with the team. So, you know, I think they saw that, you know, Oklahoma maybe saw that change, thought, all right, Mark, you know, this is basically going to get an extra coaching, extra coach on our staff, so brought him in as director of operations. And but yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's doing that job, but I'm sure he's also wrestling with the guys.
Yeah. Doesn't surprise me.
And that's out there. Roger Kish took that head position.
Yeah, I
Roselli
believe so.
left. Kish took the position. I wonder what Kish's tie-in is with Mark Hall. I'm surprised to hear this. I'm surprised that I didn't know that.
The only thing I could think of is Kish is Minnesota. Mark grew up in Minnesota, so there must be some connection. But I think, yeah, that's I don't know. I mean, I've never heard Mark talk about like knowing him or anything like that, but some type of Minnesota connection. It's just crazy after the Olympics. It's always a scramble for where everybody's going to go.
Yeah, and stuff gets lost in the mix because that should have been way bigger.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of that, it's very hard to get clarity after these last Olympics. I assume Chael Got is still wrestling only because I have not heard him say otherwise, but that's a little bit debated. And then I'm assuming Jordan Burroughs is still wrestling, which I think is like a real inspirational story if he is, but that's never really been clarified. It's kind of interesting to know where we are, like particularly with 74 kilograms. You know, you got Carr coming up, O'Toole's ready to fill that spot. My favorite wrestler to watch is Levi Haynes. They all ran into each other at the trials. I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's really interesting, but I do wish I knew who we can expect. I mean, are Burroughs and Dake going to just keep doing this, or are they going to move to 79 kilos? Or
I know Dake's in for sure. Dake's in training and, you know, moving forward with competing as far as I know. I mean, I'm seeing him in there every day. So
yeah,
he's in there. Burroughs, I know, competed in the World Championships, didn't really do great. I think probably like the first time he hadn't medaled in a long time. And I would think that, I don't know if he'll do 74 again. He might do 79.
Yeah.
And I think that most people have kind of vacated out of 86 as well. Obviously, David leaving, Aaron announced Brooks announced he's going up to 92. So 86 is pretty wide open. You have Zahid, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe Burroughs would moved up to 86 because
Brooks did announce 92, and the reason I ask, I know he said he's leaving 86, but there was always thought that he was going right into him and Schneider. He's going to stop off at 92.
So for the World Championship years, yeah, he'll be at 92.
Okay.
I don't know what it'll look like come 2028. You know, that's a long time away, but yeah, I mean, he's going to be 92 for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, Aaron looks like a tank right now.
He's
too.
big.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. It could be Sadulayev and Brooks. That'd be something to look forward to.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. That's fun. Yeah, that's a fun one. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I wanted to, get into a little bit of UFC talk. And my first kind of question to you is, I know I listened to your show and listened to you talk about my performance at UFC 309, but I just want to hear, advice for me, what you think I can do better, what you think I should focus on, and, just how to deal with all of this, because I really greatly appreciate anything you have to say and your advice. And
that's very nice of you. I was screaming during that performance. But there's many steps to it. All right, first off, I'm in your corner and I'm pulling for you, and you're going out there and you're having this fight. You're showing all of these new skills, and your feints were on point, and you're backing this guy up. And I mean, Craig's completely caught off guard. Like if the point was to show that some of these rumors we've been hearing about you from the practice room, Masvidal's always saying these wonderful things, and other guys that see you, I feel like that point was proven. But the whole night I'm waiting for you to take him down. I'm waiting for you to think, okay, maybe when there's a minute left or maybe when there's 30 seconds left. And I only say that because that's just such a dangerous game. And it's one that guys have to play. You don't have to play it. You chose to play it. And that was the part that was getting the anxiety up. And then I get a message going into the third round from Henry Cejudo that says it's one apiece. And then I get a guy, and that's not what I saw. I saw a very clear 2-0. I saw absolutely no case for Paul Craig, but I'm hearing people saying it. I'm going, well, if that's what Henry's saying as a world champion, why would a judge or two not have it that same way? And so it was just one of those spots where I felt as you got away from what you did best. And there's times when you have to do that, but it's like if I can get in your brain, it's just I have this magic wing and I can take you back in time. It's like, Bo, the day you learned to throw punches and kicks and elbows unless you can't take a guy down. For when you're fighting a Chimaev, who's maybe can give you a hard time with the takedowns. That's why you learn to do this stuff. You're opting tonight to go do those things. That's the part that was stressful. I was more stressful about it than anything else.
Right.
And then Henry Cejudo ruins everything when he says it's... And I was sitting with somebody, and I'm trying to think of who this was. It might have been Ian or Brett, but it was somebody in the know. And they were even saying that it was 2-1 Craig when the whole fight was over. And I go, oh my God. So some of my by the way, I mean, but I'm yelling from this state of mind. Oh my God! If he just ended the undefeated streak by fighting a fight that he chose to fight and didn't have to fight,
right?
I could have responded to you a little bit calmer. I was expecting you to push back a little more right now. Okay?
Yeah, no,
I was expecting. I didn't know you were going to be a gentleman about it. That is what I saw, and I mean, you confused Paul. Paul Craig is so good. Paul Craig finished Jamal Hill. Paul Craig finished Ankalaev. I feel like you going into a dominant win over Paul Craig should argue you for the top shot, and that's just not the way the story was coming out of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a couple things. I think that first off, every fight that I'd gone in prior, I had 6 fights, 6 finishes, 5 of them in the first round. My average fight time's 2 minutes, so we're looking at that's the standard. And so you see anything other than that, and I think it just looks weird to people. So as far as the look of, oh, this might be Paul Craig's fight or that he might want a round or two, it's like I think the expectation for me is just so unprecedented relative to anyone else that's ever even been in the sport. There's just nothing that's been like it. So when you see me just kind of, in my opinion, just outpointing and beating a guy, it looks weird. And people, it's like, they're almost just like there's a bias prior to, and then when I look at the way I perceived it, so I got something out of that fight that was way more valuable than a win, which was 15 minutes of time in the cage, standing on my feet, and that's something that I believe is going to pay massive dividends down the line when I'm fighting for world championship, when I'm defending my belt. I just have I have way more confidence now than previously because I did something that I've never done before against a 30-fight veteran who's beaten world champions. And so I think that in the middle of the fight, I felt like I was winning. I felt like I was controlling and dominating. So it was really just a matter of, this is great for me to continue to get experience and build my confidence, and that's the biggest thing that I lack right now is experience. So if I can get 15 minutes, then that's great. And it's not maybe the performance that people expected, but I think long term, when you zoom out and look at my career, this is a massive, massive gain for me and a huge. It's going to be paid huge dividends, as I said.
That's an interesting take. I mean, while the conversation it's the first time I've ever heard your name not put in the same sentence as Chimaev. And then you got the people like me, or you got the people on the other side arguing whose name should be first, but that's always been the conversation. One thing that did not happen, though, Bo, nobody came out of that fight challenging you. Everybody that wanted to complain about the performance, not one of them said, well, let me fight him or put me in. So I know that there is another side to it, and you're right. Like in this sport, the perception of what it's going to be ahead of time, it's very important for that post-fight press conference. I mean, one guy that likes you is Dana. Dana kind of sees what you saw. And Dana kind of saw you up close, hey, walking this guy down, and your feints were so good. I don't know if you ever threw an arm or a hand forward where you didn't touch him. Like your accuracy had to have been 97 or 98%. But let me ask you this. What if things didn't go so well? What if it wasn't such a good idea to stand up with him?
Right.
Would have you then taken him down, or were you
no 100%?
We're going to stand up.
No, 100%. That I went into the fight very open, and I wanted to see where the fight goes. So I felt really, of course, when you're standing up, there's always that chance of the guy catching you. But I felt like you can just feel the energy in the fight, and I'm like, this guy's not going to catch me. He's not going to hit me with anything big. I'm confident. I'm beating him up, so I'm going to keep it here. Let's say, things would have been more competitive, or things wouldn't have gone well, or I get hit with a shot, then guess what? Or I feel like, guess what? At the end of the round, I need to get this takedown to seal the round. That's what I'm going to do, right? So I was definitely open to getting the takedown. My just personal view of how it was going in the fight was, I'm not getting hit with anything. I'm hitting him a lot. The most significant thing that he did the whole fight was check one of my kicks. He kicked me in the arms a couple times and checked one of my kicks. Other than that, he landed nothing. And so in my mind, I'm like, I'm destroying this guy. I'm dominating him. And I think, towards the end of the third, I cut him. I rocked him. I could have got a little more aggressive and went for the finish when he was on the cage there. But, it was just, again, a good experience for me. Next time I know when I'm in that situation, I can capitalize more. And so, yeah, I felt like, if the fight, I was ready to go wherever the fight needed to go to make it happen to win. I felt like I was dominating. And if I hadn't been dominating, I would have taken him down.
It's such a good feeling too. When you have this belief in your stand-up, but you don't actually know, like you got to go out and test this and try it. When it starts working, when you're walking a guy down and your feints are working, then all of a sudden your combos are working, you're coming in and out, and he's throwing, you're slipping past. Like it's really easy to get a high from that and go, I want to go home and watch myself. I want to go on the video. I want to see myself do. Oh, did everybody see how I set that up? Did everybody see how I came here? It can be a very seductive thing that can lure you in, particularly when it's your first time doing it. And by the way, it wasn't like you didn't have a bunch of pressure on you. The president called you out in front of this whole thing. The president tells Joe Rogan about the card. He only mentions one guy's name. It's you. So there was a lot on that.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. What did your father say about the strategy? Just the strategy. What did your father say about that?
I think that we didn't really talk too much about the strategy afterwards. He was just, it was weird. I'll say this. So New York City, Madison Square Garden, you fought there. For me, it was a weird experience because the whole week I'm staying in New Jersey, and because I have an Airbnb, I make my own food. I have the whole team together with me. I didn't want to stay in a hotel for a week. And so everything's like 2-hour drive to get to the venue, got to go to the grocery store. That's another 45 minutes. We got to go train. That's 45 minutes away, all this stuff. And then I didn't get out of the fight until maybe 2:30 in the morning was when we left the venue. So we got back to our Airbnb at 4 in the morning, and I didn't even get to see my family or really anyone. A couple people popped in, but we just went to bed. So normally after the fight, we have a bunch of people there. I get to talk, to my dad, my family. And in Vegas, it's like 11 p.m. We're done. And there it was just so late. And then it was just such a crazy, hectic week. As you mentioned, the president being there. The media is so, wild. There's just all this extra to-dos. And so we just kind of got out of there. And I was like, all right, well, that was over with. I didn't even watch the fight back until 3 weeks later or something like that, where I was like, oh, I should probably watch this back and see how it went. So, yeah, it was just like a crazy weekend, hectic week. And then, of course, like the response from the crowd and everything like that. I was just kind of like, wow, that was a whirlwind. But yeah, I'm gonna have to ask him and talk to him and see what he thought about that. You know, it's funny. He doesn't really give me a lot of advice on fighting anymore. But when I very first started, he gave me the advice of just when I get in there, just trust my instincts. And I've always kept that with me through all of my fights. And but I need to ask him what he thinks about that one and get some insight.
I would be curious. Like I view him as a very good mentor and coach for you. I mean, not everybody's that is. They can love him, but it's like you got to stay back. From an outsider view, it views like, no, you and your dad figured this relationship out. But I would be curious. Hey, I'd love to hear from all of you guys. A combat athlete's biggest fear is generally not losing. The biggest fear is exhaustion. That at some point in this match, I'm going to get so tired I can no longer defend myself. And I was just wondering if that's true for you, Bo. Like, do you watch anybody? I'll use Drickus, for example, but Drickus looks like he has a very good pace. Sean Strickland, that might even be Sean's secret to success. Like, he can go out and just throw more things against the wall. Do you watch those, anybody for that matter, and worry if you can hold up?
No, not at all. My only, you know, as far as the tiredness goes, I agree that being tired is definitely the worst thing to be in a fight. It's like, you know, I've been there in training tons and tons of times, been there in wrestling matches tons and tons of times, but I just feel confident in my training, confident in my skills, and, you know, I work with Sam Calavita with Treigning Labs, so I'm doing so much for a camp just to prepare for this fight. That's like other people, so many things that other people just aren't willing to do. Like, everybody can go in the gym and train hard, but not everybody does all the different recovery things that I do. Not everybody plans their volume out the way I do for a whole camp. Not everybody's willing to take rest days and take recovery days to make sure your body is in the shape it needs to be. And because I know I'm going to work hard. Like, everybody at this level works hard. So, but I do all the other little things that just give me confidence and peace when I go in there, that being tired is literally not a concern at all. And I've never lost a wrestling match one time in my whole life because I was tired, right? So that's not a fear for me. My biggest fear, I would say, is just getting knocked out, which that's like, you know, in my mind, it's like that's the only way I'm going to lose a fight is if somebody just gets lucky and knocks me out. But I have zero fear of getting tired against anybody in the world because I've just been there too many times, and I just do everything that I need to do without a question.
You know, you brought up Coach Cael, and I've heard you tell horror stories of training with him where you're bragging. I mean it from the same way. I was also trained by Coach Cael. And the first day, he tells me is going to be easy. He actually used that word. This is going to be easy. And we were going to do, it was the scientific day. We're going to do the VO2 max, and we're just going to get some numbers. We're just going to do some stuff so we can get some numbers for a base. It was so hard. Oh my God. It was so incredibly hard. And it was only like 55 minutes, somewhere right around that hour point. It was, and we did this in his office, by the way. I heard you tell a story where you guys were like running the plates, like doing the sled. And then when you got back to the garage, you assume that, you know, shake somebody's hand and we'll see you tomorrow. And he was like, all right, great. Now we're warm. Yeah. This was in his office. He didn't even have the equipment that he would have liked to have had to abuse me. It was just, he just had a treadmill, and he could put it up and he could put it down, and then he could speed the thing up, and you got to put this thing up. And you know what? I would have come back every day he told me to. He has the most positive attitude. I don't even go around him for the training. I go for that positive attitude. I feel better about myself when I'm around Coach Cael. That's the truth.
And he lulls you in with a soft voice, and so you don't really know what's happening until it's too late.
Oh, you gotta be through it too. You gotta go through it too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Tell Anthony lived out there for.
Yeah, I spent like a month and a half out there after one of my surgeries, and I thought it was going to be like more recovery stuff, but I just did the exact same workouts with one side of my body. And so it was just as bad. But no, anytime we get within like 10 miles of his house, we somehow end up in the garage. Like 4 hours later, we're wondering how we got there. But
yes.
Yeah, we're there not so often, so I feel like he really tries to like make us remember that day. Sure. And so we're there for crazy workouts, 3.5 hours. We're pushing sleds up like a 1/4 mile hill, get to the top, and then we pull it all the way back. And he's like, all right, that's good for the warm up. And we're just like, all right, at that point it's just do or die.
Yeah. I was on Joe Rogan podcast, and I told him about the workout some of the workouts that we did, and he was like, "Why'd you do that,
Yeah.
man?" Like he's like, "That's probably not good." I'm like, it really, that actual workout is probably like it's good for you in that you can go there to that dark place, and it's like I'm just not scared. Like, okay, I did that workout for 4 hours. What's Drickus Duplessis or Sean Strickland gonna do to me?
Yeah,
Nothing.
in 25
Like,
minutes.
nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest advantage is that mental edge. But he knows how to push you, and if you show any signs of weakness or giving up, you're not coming back. So
Yeah. No, it's incredible. I've never met somebody that's worked with him, though, that I didn't look at with a level of respect. Like, I just know what they've gone through, and then as I get to know them more as a person, like every single time, 100%. If you can make it through Coach Cael, there's always you got good character, and you're an honest, hardworking guy. Like, every time, he definitely has his way to weed them out.
yeah.
What was training like for you coming up? I saw that you started MMA when you were 19, so pretty young. So for you, transitioning from wrestling to MMA as a teenager, what was that like, and then what was the training like for you to try to get better?
And so much of it was in your mind. Like, if I was to tell you my story and you go, wow, that sounds crazy, it does, but that's what everybody else was doing. So if you could somehow be associated with a wrestling team, maybe the junior college or something like this. I happen to still be part of a wrestling program, and then you would go and get a guy to hold mitts for you, and that was your boxing workout. So maybe you get that once a week, or maybe you made a really fancy guy, and he could do hands and feet, but you never considered sparring. That was not a thing. There was not a gym called an MMA gym. You might find some boxers where they would let you come in if you did it for free, then they would just beat the hell out of you. And then you get your wrestling in. Most guys' groundwork was moving your coffee table out in the living room, and you and a buddy are dropping into positions. And then if you could find a fight 2 or 3 times a year, your opponent was in that exact same spot. And there wasn't weigh-ins, and there wasn't commissions, and there generally be like in the rules meeting, you go, hey, at this weight class, are we doing heel hooks, or are we doing toe holds? And the guys would just show their hands. But the referee would never write it down, or however, you just had like this agreement with your partner. I don't know if I explained that very well, but I went out and fought a guy, and I was convinced I was going to be the champion. I remember the girl that I took to prom. I told her I was going to be champion because to lose, you have to tap out, and I will never tap out. I remember telling her this. So I'm going to be champion. I watched this guy fight called Don Fry, and he wrestled some at Oklahoma State, and he came out, and he was this boxer, he was boxing guys, and when I would move around my living room, I was like Don Fry, and I'm going to hit him just like I saw Don Fry do. I'm going to get in, and I'm going to grab him and take him down just like I saw Don Fry do, and I believed that. So I got into the ring for my first fight. I never touched the guy once. I have no idea how hard it is to actually hit a target that's moving, let alone how exhausting it is to bounce around in this position that I've never done. And that fight was so hard, but he was in the same spot. He sucked just as bad as I did. 5 years later, they rematched us in the UFC.
Wow.
And yeah, we were just 2 guys that agreed to show up to this event. So then when I got out of college, we were one of the top gyms around. We only had 3 or 4 guys, but Evan Tanner, rest his soul, went on to be world champion. And Matt Lindland never got the belt, but he was actually ranked #1. Dan Henderson had a couple of belts from Pride, and Randy was the on and off UFC champion at 2 different weight classes. And this was our room, but we didn't have a coach. We would show up every day at 3, and then it would be, somebody would ask, are we going big gloves or little gloves today? And then it was like a popular opinion. We put our gloves on, and then the clock just went ding every 5 minutes. So you had 1 warm-up round, and then we just sparred, and we just went home. And as silly as that was, Randy was the world champion. Dan had beaten Matt was ranked #1. Evan was the world champion. Like, that theory actually worked. And way down the road, we had some weekend where Dan got beat on Friday in Japan, and Randy got beat on Saturday in Las Vegas. And we decided by Monday, like we had this huddle up at this coffee shop at the MGM Grand on Sunday that starting Monday, we're going to warm up together at a certain time, and then we're going to work on technique. And we had no idea who was going to show us this technique, but that's how wrestling practice was. And then we're going to go live, and then we're going to condition. And like, this was a really big deal to get us to do that, but nobody knew that MMA was a sport. You know, it used to be, man, if this guy had a big tattoo, he was the tougher guy. Or like if this guy could bench press, you know, a couple pounds more than you, he was a bigger badass. Like we actually believed that around town. That carried over to the octagon. Have you ever ran into a guy that was missing front teeth? Forget it. Just make him the champion. That was the best dude around. But we actually believed these things. You know, all we had was Hollywood. There was no frame for a base of reference. There was no gyms. There was no trading and moving around. In Oregon, I've been a little wordy on this, but I just think you might think this is interesting. You can find a black belt everywhere now. Anywhere in America, there's a black belt somewhere in that town. Back then, we had two guys, and they were both purple belts. In fact, their father was Mackenzie Derns' I apologize, their coach is Mackenzie Derns' father. And they would catch a plane out to Arizona 1 weekend a month, and they would learn these jiu-jitsu holds. And they were purple belts, but they owned the only jiu-jitsu gym in town. Like, there was no purple belts. There was no brown belts. There was no black belts. These were the highest guys, and they were purple. I mean, it was just a very different time. In fact, in 1994, when I started college, there was 6 Gracie-certified black belts in all of America.
Wow.
Rickson Gracie had just fought Mark Schultz. They got into a fight, which I heard about, and this is before the internet was a thing. This is a year before people had what's called email. And I heard about this. I went and signed. I went and wrestled with Mark Schultz at BYU.
Wow.
All because he fought Rickson Gracie. He actually lost the fight.
Yeah.
But I knew it was the closest thing I could get to a Gracie.
Yeah.
I went and wrestled for Mark.
So you knew you wanted to fight from a young age. It was like, you were like, what was the, did you get into wrestling because you wanted to fight then, or what was the motivation?
No, I stayed in wrestling. So there was always a debate going on who the baddest dude in the world was. Was it the wrestling champion, who at that time was Bruce Baumgartner, or was it the boxing champion, who at that time was Mike Tyson? And my dad told me, and my dad's an old wrestler, he told me it's the boxing champion. He told me that Mike Tyson would beat Bruce Baumgartner's ass. And we searched everywhere to find a boxing gym, and we could not find one. They're not easy to find now. Like, boxing gyms bring in such low revenue. They don't have signs up front. They don't have, you know, ads out in the paper. We simply couldn't find one. So we ended up with wrestling as a default. And then there was something called the Ultimate Fighting Championship that came along when I was a junior in high school. And that was the thing where my father and I both realized that whoever is the best at that is the baddest dude in the world. It's not the wrestler. It's not the boxer. It's that. And I made my transition right there. That day, I made my switch.
Wow. That's interesting. So you kind of, that timing is so cool because it really became a thing after you had already had some experience in combat sports, and you were almost looking for it as it happened in real time.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, I got so lucky timing-wise, and your era is more lucky than mine. But the guys that came through just before me, like Mark Kerr and Mark Coleman, there's one of the greatest fighters ever, gets no credit. His name is Frank Shamrock, and they were fighting, and they were really good at fighting at a time when people weren't watching fighting. It was still in the dark ages. The place called MMA.TV, but that controlled our sport. Everybody from Dana White was on there lining up fights. That's where it happened. If you called somebody out, you called them up on this, on the Underground Forum, it was called. And if there was a show or an event, that's where you found out, because there was no advertising. And don't forget, I mean, the internet was hard. The internet was a very rare thing for people to have. There was no such thing as a smartphone. So getting this information was difficult. And fortunately, just right at the cusp, as I was coming through, then pay-per-view took over, and now we've got it on linear television and .coms and streaming apps. But that was not even a thing. That was not a thing when you started college, Bo. When you started college, people weren't streaming. There was nothing called Fight Pass out there. There was no ESPN Plus even out there. So the world is going quickly, but I do thank goodness that I happen to be kind of part of that time.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you were actually you were ahead of your time, because not only were you a fighter and, you know, be able to have the skills, but you also were, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in my opinion, the first person to actually like promote themselves, and the first person to be like, I'm going to promote this fight, like tell the guy like, hey, I'm going to whoop your butt and there's nothing you can do about it. And then people were like, what? You can say that type of stuff before the fight's going on? Like, you can talk trash this is crazy. And so talk to me about like how that kind of came about. And was that just your personality naturally? Or did you have to work at it? Like, was it seems natural. So what was that about?
I know I've seen other guys do it. I mean, it's like anything. You see somebody else, and so you start copying it. But I was never a sports fan. To this day, I have never seen a Super Bowl. I've never watched a total basketball game. I even bought season tickets to a semi-pro hockey, and I had to get up and leave. I never made it to a bowl game. But I have seen every political debate you could think of, like all of the boring ones, and the senator versus this senator in the state of Massachusetts 10 years ago. I've watched all of those. And I was always interested in the fight, in the absolute fight that they're going to have. One person is going to leave that stage the winner. One person is going to leave that stage the alpha, but they're never going to touch each other. It's only a debate on ideas and quirks and words and tone and effect. And I was interested in that. Oh my God, I love the presidential cycle every 4 years. I love that whole thing back and forth from a fight perspective, but I know they're never even going to touch one another. So I got into that. I wanted to talk like the man on the 6 o'clock news. I remember the first day of school, they would always have every day was the same thing. Every year, first grade, second grade, third grade, but you write down on the piece of paper, what are you going to be when you grow up? And every year until my junior year of high school, I wrote President of the United States.
Wow.
My junior year, I wrote Governor of Oregon because I realized I like this state. I don't want to leave it. But I only say from that perspective, like that was interesting to me. The guys that I used to watch, even the Hulk Hogan's, for example, and I wasn't as big of a wrestling fan as people have made it out to be, but I did appreciate that. I did appreciate when there was something to look forward to. And my favorite fighter for a brief period of time was Tank Abbott. But Tank was really the first. A lot of people say it was me, but I got influenced by Tank.
Okay.
And Tank was just doing it at a time when there wasn't a lot of people watching. But he was the first one to say this is not about honor and this is not about respect. This is a fist fight in a steel cage for the applause of a drunken audience. And, it was one of these interesting things where just conceptually, I always felt that he was right. I've never seen an honor in telling somebody that, something nice to their face and then stabbing them in the back when they turn around. I find an honor in telling them when you turn around, I'm going to put a knife in your back. I think that's more honorable.
No, absolutely. No,
Fair take.
It's amazing.
Did you ever seriously consider going down a different path other than fighting? And when will you run for office?
I am a little surprised that Tony Two Fingers knows who I am. This is actually a strange setting for me to see you in this type of a thing, because I've only seen it from a distance. Oh, you got this beautiful wife, and your father was coming on, and your father was upset with Cael for a period, and they let it go. And
He stole the show.
Eating all that food and lifting all them weights. I was so into that whole thing. How did you guys end up on the same side of the bracket at the NCAAs? I still feel like that didn't happen. When I think of your NCAA match, and I have argued this, and I'm wrong, I lose the argument. I have argued that was the finals. How did they possibly put you on the same side?
Everyone always tells me these days, like, congrats. Like, they think that I beat him in the finals. Like, no one remembers my finals match.
Yeah.
I didn't know you didn't beat him in the finals until right now.
Yeah.
Big Ten, it was the finals. But for nationals, they put them on the same side, which is offensive. Do you remember what they did to Carter Starocci last year? They seeded him number 11.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He hadn't lost a wrestling match in years. They seeded him number 11 off of an injury default. Poor Mekhi Lewis. Mekhi's an NCAA champion and a world champion. He's got to deal with this guy on the same side of the bracket. Come on, man. They didn't help anybody. They screwed all those other guys.
Yeah. They like to make it tough for us. But
yeah, they've done that. They've done that time and time again. I remember our sophomore year. It was our junior year. Jason Nolf had an injury, and they seeded him number 6. He's a defending national champion, undefeated. They just seeded him number 6.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, and just because he had he forfeited in the Big Ten for a couple matches, but it was like he's the best guy, and so he had to wrestle Mikey Kemmerer in the quarterfinals. It was the 2 best guys in the quarterfinals.
Wow. Yeah,
but I don't know. They do that a lot. It's weird. I feel like
that was some kind of retribution, Bo. They were trying to stick it to Penn State for pulling him out of the Big Ten, and they are really and wrestling does need to do something about the wrestleback. But this was not a situation where Carter refused to do the wrestle back. He didn't get to do the front side. Cael pulled him out. There wasn't a single round of wrestling.
Right.
And to punish them all, they put him as the 11th seed, and they end up screwing this poor Mekhi Lewis and everybody else. They screwed those guys.
It ends up being worse for everybody else.
Yeah.
If you're the best guy, it doesn't matter. You'll just beat everybody. But if the other guys that, would be the number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they're the ones that get screwed. And so then you end up having people that are there that shouldn't be. But if you, let me ask you a question. If you had total control, power, everything, that you can make it exactly the way you want it, what would
that'd be a good idea.
Yeah. What would you change about NCAA wrestling?
Oh my goodness, I love it. So I'm such a fan. Complaining about it is part of being a fan. Like, I can't fully be happy if I can't complain. I wouldn't have liked your match with Paul Craig as much as I did if I couldn't complain. Like, that's a piece of being a fan for me. I like to say yeah, but I like to say boo. I'm just happier when I can do that. Do you realize that Carter and Mekhi wrestled in the quarters? So if you're Mekhi, you're a national champion, you're an age group world champion, you got to come back through the blood round. Do you know how hard that is to do? And the only reason you have to do that, not on any of your other good works, but all because the CD Mini wanted to stick it to Penn State, that was so wrong of them to do. And Carter showed massive, I apologize, Mekhi showed massive mental toughness being able to come back and do that. But if I could do one thing, if I had one hope, and it wouldn't just be NCAA, Bo, it would be everything. USA Wrestling is more guilty. It is this wrestleback issue. It's very hard, and we have some of the best matches in the wrestleback. I can think of this year's trials, but I wanted to see 2 matches really bad. I wanted to see Levi take on Carr, and I wanted to see Levi take on O'Toole. I got both of those plus Carr versus O'Toole in like a 50-minute period because they just kept running them out there. But none of those guys flinched, and anybody else would have, particularly in the Levi O'Toole. Somebody there, some coach, somebody's going to get involved and say, no, let's do this later. I love that they didn't do that. And if I had a magic wand that could fix one thing, man, I really do wish guys would wrestle back. I think who's third is really important. I think who's fifth is really important. I would like to know. The guys that we put third, fourth, fifth, and sixth are actually the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth best guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think when I was in 6th grade, so I was maybe 11 or 12, I attended my first NCAA wrestling tournament with my dad. And that was a big deal for us because my parents are school teachers. My dad's a wrestling coach. We had to go all the way to St. Louis, Missouri. Like, it was a long way. Tickets are expensive. And so we were in our seats, an hour before the tournament started. And I don't even think we left our seats. I think that we just stayed in the venue the whole weekend, Really? But we were there for every session, for everything. And I remember my favorite round was Saturday morning. You get the consolation semifinals and you get the medal matches. And I was just like, this is incredible. This is so fun to watch these guys because there's a lot of good rounds. The finals are obviously great. The beginning's great. You have the blood round, which is great. But when the guys get in for the place, it's like, and they get in, all right, I'm either going to be 3rd or 8th. I'm in here. They get loose and they have fun and they're like excited to compete. And it's like, all right, let's just let it rip. And you get some of the best matches ever in those rounds. And it's just, and the venue is the least full. There's the lowest attendance of any session is that session.
Wow.
Yeah. And I went even as far as to when I competed in NCAAs, I didn't do this my first year, but my sophomore, junior, senior year, I would go on Saturday morning and watch while I was going to wrestle the finals that night.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And just because I loved watching those matches. It was so fun.
I completely agree with you. Even as a viewer from television, that is the most fun to watch because you get to know them right then. If I'm watching with somebody else that doesn't follow it like me, it's a guy, and then 40 minutes later, he's up again. 40 minutes later, he could be up again for 7th place. And no, I love that. I respect that round so much. It drives me crazy when fighters miss matches or they have to have this big, long discussion and meeting period over matching up. Like this Jones versus Aspinall, I hate this stuff. If you're the guy and you're the guy, and Khabib's team appears to still get that this is competition first and it's business second. This is about competition. But when I watch that round that you're referring to, and the consolation semis and then the medal matches, I can never feel for a fighter that's given 3 months advance notice and a training camp and gets to sit back and study a guy. I like the guy. They're walking out there. They all got wrapped up. They got to take the ice off their elbow to go wrestle and put it back on their elbow. Those are the guys I really respect.
Yeah, look at Cael last year. Wrestled like 8 matches to get third place.
Yeah, Tyler Cael lost first round, came back, beat so many tough guys. Ridge Lovett, number 1 seed, got upset in the semis.
Right.
Cael major decisions him, just goes on a tear. And yeah, there's just so many cool storylines that go through that, and it's so hard, as you mentioned. I remember our junior year was the craziest team race of all time. It was Penn State, Ohio State. On our team, you had all of us, and then Ohio State had Kyle Snyder and Joe McKenna and Colin Moore and Miles Martin and Bo Jordan and Mike Jordan. It was like a super team, and they were even recruited McKenna in from Stanford. I think they had Nathan Tomasello. Like these guys that was like an insane team. And I remember being so nervous about the team race because I'm a team guy. My dad was a coach. I was always focused on the team. And our first round, Nick Lee is wrestling Ryan Deal from Maryland, and he's beating him, taking him down, whooping, and then gets thrown on his back in a cement mixer and pinned. And I was like, are you kidding me? Nick Lee, true freshman. We got this crazy team race. I was like, we're done. Like, we're not going to be able – he was the number, 5 or 6 seed, something like that. And I was like, we're done. This is not good. And then, lo and behold, long story short, Nick Lee comes all the way back, gets tons of bonus point wins on the backside, and takes 5th place, which for him, he was a little disappointed. He wanted to win, but that won us the team race. Like, if he goes out there, even if he wins a couple matches and then loses in the blood round, or if he just decides to lay down and lose on the backside, like, we don't win. We lose. And people talk about how I pinned Miles in the finals, but they don't realize, like, that was way tougher. way more difficult. Like, you got to respect that way more winning, I think he won 6 or 7 matches to get back to that point. And it's like, seems like every year there's 1 or 2 guys that just really shows their mettle on that backside. It's
fellas,
fun.
If there's one statement that's for sure true about wrestling, nobody in the history of the world that any of us have ever met knows how to score a wrestling tournament.
Right.
Like, that would be the last thing that I would even know who to call to find out how to do it. But if you get those pigtails, those are bonus points. And if you lose early and come through the consolation, there was a guy called Oscar Wood.
Yeah.
And it was 1994, and he went down in the very first round. He was 3rd from the previous year. Or I apologize. He was 5th from the previous year. He goes down in the very first round, pins 7 guys to come back for 3rd, including the guy that beat him in the very first round. So he gets 7 matches, all with bonus points. And he scores in bonus points alone as many as it would be if a team got a bronze medalist. Wow. So he got 3rd himself, but he scored enough points for a whole nother 3rd place, all because of the way the consolation works. So I fully understand your point with Nick Lee. And good for Nick toughing it up and going doing that. That's a massive gut check to be in that situation. I respect that Nick did it. I didn't realize he lost his first round. That year he got 5th.
He did, yeah. He got 5th. Then next year got 5th. He lost in maybe, I think, the semis or the quarters, and then won back to back 2 in a row. But
has he committed to another cycle?
He's coaching. He's on the Penn State coaching staff, so full-time coach. I think, he could continue to compete, but I just feel like he's wanting to move on. It's crazy after, again, I mentioned it earlier, but the Olympic cycle, it's like this is the craziest time in wrestling. It's kind of a little bit over now that we're at the end of the year, but so many moving parts, and guys go in, guys come out, guys change places. Massive coaching shift going. David and all those guys going to Oklahoma State. It's like it's fun to just kind of see from an outside perspective.
Great, especially with COVID, and then it was like 3 years instead of 4 years. So a lot of people stuck around for the 7 years instead of usually there's like retirements after each cycle, and then guys choose to come back or not. But I felt like it kind of overloaded into this past Olympic cycle because guys stuck with it since it was a shorter turnaround.
Has Zane made an announcement on what he's doing? I know he doesn't plan to compete again, but has he officially announced that?
Yeah, he's not competing, but he still trains with us full time. So he's just training with the guys, and he actually was doing some financial advising for a little while. And Yeah, I think he's interested in business and entrepreneurial type of endeavor, stuff like that. But he was a finance major at Penn State. I think he got his master's? I think he got his MBA. And just real smart guy. So he's not going to be competing anymore.
He's a nasty competitor. That guy he's ruthless. He looks like such a sweet young man. You guys remember John Smith by name, but John Smith, he was cute, he was young for his time, and he moved around real fast. But if you really watched him, just like Zane, they will tear your arm off for a point that they don't even need. If this match was locked up, he will take your arm off and not feel bad. I mean, Zane is ruthless, man. Zane is one of the greats. I know he gets credit for that, but Zane's even better than he gets credit for. World champion. He's better than that. Zane is one of the best wrestlers of the last decade. He just happens to be doing it the hardest weight class that the world even has. But yeah, I'm a fan. Zane used to have problems with Pico. Are you guys old enough to remember that?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
I believe their total score is 0-7.
Yeah. No, it's pretty.
I don't think that Zane ever got over on him. Pico was the guy, and then Pico just, after the trials ended in 16, he had enough.
Yeah.
That was it. Moved over to MMA.
No, it was really crazy, Aaron. So Aaron and me, and I guess Tony as well, we're the same year in school. So he was a senior in high school, same year I was. And I remember we made the cadet world team that summer before our senior year. And I had committed to Penn State. And they actually put us together in a room. Like, we were doing their training camp, we were rooming together. And so we became friendly. And I was like, dude, you got to come to Penn State, man. Like, you're freaking awesome. We're the best team. Like, let's go to Penn State. Let's kill it. And he was like, oh, no. He kind of was like beating around the bush, like not really saying much. And I was like, dude, why would you not want to go to Penn? Like, it's freaking Penn State. Like, this is the best situation possible for any wrestler. And I finally got it out of him. He's like, no, like, and this was in 2013. He was like, no, I'm just going to do the Olympics in 2016, and then I'm going to fight MMA. And I was like, what? That sounds insane. Like, I was like, we're 16, 17-year-old kids. I was like, so you're going to win the Olympics in 2.5, 3 years, and then you're going to fight when we're 20. I was like, and he was like, yeah. I was like, all right, bro, good luck. He was like, actually, and then he told me too, he was like, I actually can't even go to school. I signed a deal with Nike. I was like, what? What do you mean you signed a deal with Nike?
I would go to school, but here's the thing.
Yeah, here's the thing. I signed with Nike. I was like, yeah, man, you're do your thing. I'm gonna go to school and just be a normal guy. But yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I remember when he was saying that, and we all thought, well, he's put himself in a corner where it's my last run, and therefore I got to do it. Like, we never believed him. Nobody thought this was real. Cejudo had done the same thing, and Cejudo made it very clear, I'm not going that route. But we didn't believe him. We, get a little motivation, and he'll be here. But yeah, very unique path, man.
Yeah.
Unique success, though. Who's ever had more success at such a young age? Jeez.
No, I can't really. I mean, the only guy I can think of is Snyder, right? Like, Cael did really well, obviously winning world championships and Olympics in college, but even he's still not as young as what Aaron was. But yeah, it's an interesting sport. What do you think about a lot of the wrestlers who are transitioning over to MMA right now? We have quite a bit of guys that are pretty tough. Tyler Berger's got a couple fights. Austin O'Connor, Nick Piccinini. There's Jacoby Smith just won on Contender Series. What do you think about some of these guys?
Yeah. Yeah, Shaner, a guy, Oregon State guy, also came over, but they're good. They look really good. I didn't know that Cassar did the 2 fights and done though. I thought we were looking for like a contender series route there. So yeah. I'm looking for a wrestler to get behind. Is my point, and it's not the same as it used to be. It used to be where that was enough, and if it wasn't, you could figure out in the couple of months of training camp leading into it. MMA is definitely its own sport now. And those guys do deserve credit. Like, I need to give more credit to them. I do find myself falling for whoever the better wrestler is going to win. And that's the way it used to be. But it's really not. MMA is definitely its own sport now. And I think that the wrestlers are going to do very well. I'll give you an interesting stat, but not only do we not have a top 10, and I'm talking about the heavyweight division, not only do we not have a top 10 guy, not only do we not have an NCAA All-American in the top 10, UFC does not have one under contract. There is not a heavyweight under UFC contract right now that is an NCAA All-American. And that's before you get to worlds or medals or anything else. And I think that's a surprise. And it's not that the UFC is unwilling to sign these guys. There's not a lot of them out there. Which brings me back to Tony Two Fingers. Why are we calling it a career? Why? What for?
Wow.
I just have this other passion that I love, and I want to do it more. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I respect it. If there's ever a day where you've had enough, man, I respect it.
And I appreciate my face a little bit.
Got to stay pretty.
By the way, is there a theme over there with the socks? Like, I noticed, two of you look a little comfortable. Is this like?
Oh,
Well, see, Chael, I'm a classy man. I typically do not let my guest have shoes in the house, but Tony walked in here.
I just wanted to show a sign of respect for our guest.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a big
No, that
deal.
is classic. By the way, this is your house. This is a cool room you got. That's quite a man cave.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is my place. Somehow, some way,
Got
we
the
made it here.
studio. Got the studio.
good
Said
work.
you got an extra bedroom.
I do have an extra bedroom.
You're young guy, yeah. Right? You don't have like
Yeah.
a wife or anything. So
No, I have a girlfriend, but we're not there yet.
Yeah,
not there
for
yet. Joe, I have a question for you. Is
I'm all ears.
as non-biased as it gets, what would it take for Penn State to come in second in the NCAA tournament?
Okay, it would have to be very unrealistic. Okay, for Penn State to come in second, you're going to have a Carter Starochi situation ×2 at the Big Tens. Someone's going to have to not get through, and there's got to be some kind of an injury where something just doesn't pan out. And then for them to come all the way to second, see, that's a problem because they're like 57 points ahead. 57 points is a lot of points to cover the spread. If Penn State ends up with 3 guys in the finals, they win it. If they end up with 2 champions, they win it. So how do I get them with less than 3 in the finals and less than 2 champions? That's a very, it's a very hard thing. And I don't want to answer because I'm going to have to say injury, and I just don't want to put that into the world.
Yeah.
I don't want to put into the world anything where there could be some type of injury. But as far as competition goes, head-to-head competitions, there's just nobody that can beat them right now. They're just too good. And it is such a compelling race for second. And I realize nobody talks about it, but if they did, it is such a compelling race for second. 57 points is if Penn State's going to win by 57 to 70 points. But second to fifth is going to be separated by closer to 7 points. The NCAA is actually very, very competitive right now, just not for the crown.
Yeah.
It's a great time to be a wrestling fan.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's so crazy, too, because Cael does not get, like, the flowers he deserves. Because if you really look at all these coaches across literally every major sport, I mean, who really compares to Cael Sanderson in terms of championships? Like, you can say Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. You could say Nick Saban. Like, I don't know.
He's doubling up on him.
Yeah. Who won before Cael? It was the guy from Oklahoma State, right?
Well,
He had, like,
Iowa.
John Smith, I think there's only been 6 schools in history to win it. Minnesota slipped in there, Ohio State slipped in there, but then it was Arizona State. They won it in 88 or 89, but the interesting thing was they had no champions. But they All-Americaned each weight class. It was enough to win the title. And then you've got Oklahoma State and Iowa, and that's before Penn State comes in. So I think that's 7 schools in history. I actually sat next to a person on an airplane that was explaining to me one time how uncompetitive wrestling is. And I could not believe it. Like, these were fighting words. I could not believe it. And they explained to me. And at that time, there'd only been 5 champions. This is before Ohio State and Penn State had got in there. It was Minnesota. It was Minnesota and the other Iowa schools and Arizona State. And they said, in the history of your sport, you've only had 5 champions. That is extremely uncompetitive. Oklahoma State has won it 33 times. Iowa's won it 26 times. Like, this is not competitive. And from that perspective, from an outsider standpoint, I do get that point. There is not very many teams that have ever won this. And I don't know if people realize that. Before Penn State slipped in here, well, it had only been Ohio State got it done once, Minnesota got it done twice, and then it was just back and forth between Iowa and Oklahoma State with one exception of Arizona State. Are you aware of that? 7 teams ever has won an NCAA title.
Crazy.
Yeah, I was aware of that, and it's every time it's said, it's weird to think about because I think, as you were kind of alluding to, as a wrestler, you think of wrestling as this is incredibly competitive, and there's so much variety, and I think from year to year on an individual level there is, right? you can have, I mean, the amount of guys that are winning multiple national titles, it drops off crazy from winning 1 to winning 2, and even crazier 2 to 3, right? And then nowadays there's maybe like, I don't know, 6 or 7 guys that have won 4. When I started high school, Coach Cael and Pat Smith were the only guys that have ever won 4 national titles. That's it. And then Logan Stieber won 4, and now a few guys have done it since then. Dake has won it.
Aaron.
There's a bunch of guys that have done it since. But as on an individual level, wrestling so competitive. But yeah, the teams, it's just all kind of grouped up on, like as you mentioned, 6, 7 teams. And even nowadays, it's like realistically, you got about 4 teams year to year that have a shot. You got Penn State, Iowa, Oklahoma State, Ohio State.
It's just so crazy, especially with NIL now. I figure like some huge donor would come into one of these other schools and just fork up.
What do you think about the NIL, Chael? What is like your kind of overall perception of that and how it's going?
Well, the NCAA, I mean, they were the scum of the earth for all those years, not only convincing, but making it so that if you took $1, you weren't eligible. That was a very terrible thing that they did, but this NIL is going to come with some real consequence. I mean, the graduation rate is going to drop. The arrest rate is going to go up. I mean, there are some problems with making an 18-year-old famous and rich, right? His first year he leaves his house. But but that is more correct than what they were doing, where they gave nothing. And you talk about one school coming in paying. I'm going to make an outside prediction for you with no inside knowledge, but I believe Bo Bassett will end up some money guy somewhere, an American university, Columbia, Rutgers, a university like this, that somebody will come in and grab him and use to build. That's who I think is going to come up with that money.
Yeah.
You were talking about how good and successful Cael Sanderson has been. There are years, believe it or not, that are good years to win the NCAA. I could produce names for you. I could produce a guy that won 3 NCAA titles and he never placed in the National Open. I don't want to put him down, but believe it or not, there's good years to win the NCAA. Cael won it in the worst possible years. When Cael was a freshman, no one knows about this. In the semifinals, he had Brad Varing. Brad Varing is a 2-time Olympian. He's a world silver medalist. He's an NCAA champion, and Cael pinned him. And that was in the semifinals. That drew Cael in to world silver medalist, 4-time All-American, and current head coach of Minnesota, Brandon Eggum. That was as a freshman. Twice he had to deal with Daniel Cormier in the finals. I mean, it's just not what people think. Like the
Curtis
years
Jones as well
were really, really tough years. And but particularly that freshman year. You know, people know that he beat Eggum. I think it was 5-1 in the finals, and it was a huge surprise because it made him an undefeated champion as a freshman. But just in the semis, he had to get through an NCAA champion that went on to make 2 Olympic teams.
Wow.
I think he deserves a little bit more credit for that than he gets.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
crazy.
I'd agree with that for sure. You know, it's interesting, when you look at the guys that he's beat, because people talk about undefeated, this or that, but he's got a crazy hit list. I mean, if you look at collegiately, as you mentioned, DC, John Trent, Eggum, Varing, Vertus Jones, and then internationally, obviously, he beat Yoel. He beat a couple Russians. He beat some good Iranians. I mean, he's beat. And then for the freestyle circuit, he beat Lee Fullhard a bunch of times. He beat Mo Lawal. Like he's got you could just keep going down the list, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
You mentioned John Trench. John Trench was an excellent college wrestler. He ended up with an injury which set him back. He was still a finalist, but John Trench was something very special. He had that injury. Where is he today?
I have no idea. Have you watched his documentary? He had a cool documentary on him.
No.
Yeah, it's called Veritas, but it's just kind of a story of his life. But I have no idea where he is right now. This was only through college, but you should check out the documentary. It's interesting.
Well, I've heard of Veritas. I had no idea that had anything to do with John Trench.
Yeah,
I will definitely go watch it.
Yeah, check it out.
He was a hammer. He won Fargo in both styles. He was kind of a blue chipper coming through, but Lehigh, you didn't quite know what to expect, and I believe he ended up a 2-time finalist. I believe he lost 1 to Hahn and 1 to Cael.
He got lateral dropped with less than 5 seconds left to lose against Hahn. And then the next year it was him and Cael, which was like, have fun.
Yep. And that lateral, by the way, ended up just as a takedown. He lateraled him like off. They both lose their balance, and Damian Hunt, that was a good high school wrestler. Damian Hunt, man, that guy won so many matches. He had beaten 7 NCAA champions before he had his first NCAA match.
That's
in
crazy.
between high school and then his redshirt year. But he had taken out 7 NCAA champions. Cael Sanderson was one of them, by the way.
Oh, really?
Damian Hunt
Wow.
kept Cael Sanderson off the junior world team.
Really?
Very little known fact.
No, I didn't know that.
That's crazy.
You mentioned Lee Fullhart earlier. Lee Fullhart stopped Cael Sanderson from placing in the U.S. Open Cael's first time, and that would have been 99.
And I think that
And it should have been the wrestleback.
on the front side, he lost to Les Gutchess, I believe, in a really crazy match.
That's what it was. That's what it was. So that was the semifinals. Gutchess duck under, hit him for 5, threw him for 5 points. Gutchess had not been taken down by an American in 3 years. Cael took him down 5 times in one match. hits a duck under, throws him for 5, ends up winning that match. So that would have made Cael top 6 right there because he lost to Fullhart and the score with 10-6 in a wrestleback. But that must have been the All-American round, not the blood round. That must have been the Conci semis.
Wow.
10-6, and it was a huge surprise. And when that match was going down, everyone in the arena knew something's about to happen. Like Fullhart's been upset, Cael's been upset, like something is about to happen, and it's happening on this back mat that no one's talking about. And the whole building like found their way over 10-6. And if there was ever a fight in a wrestling match, it was that match.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's
If there was ever a match that should be looked at for review for the dirtiest, hardest blood, 10-6 Sanderson versus Fullhart. The year was 2000. That's exactly right.
you know
Wow.
you know what's crazy. So probably 95 to 99% of these matches that happened back then are not on video. There's no way to go back and look at them. But when I was a kid, so probably when I was maybe 12 years old, my dad somehow got a hold of, I forget who the coach of the Olympic Training Center was at that point, but my dad got a hold of the coach, and they had camcorder videos of every Olympic and World Trials finals match from like 1988 to 2000 and to 2001 or something like that, and it was, John Smith versus Randy Lewis and Randy Couture versus, I forget the guys that he beat, and like all these crazy matches. They had Dennis Hall versus Jim Grunwald was a crazy Greco rivalry. They had like just all these old Dave Schultz, Kenny Monday matches, and I just had like I was probably the only kid or the only person that had these outside of the Olympic coaches, and my dad just got him to burn all the videos for him, and I would watch them on my way to wrestling tournaments or wherever, and my sisters would be so mad. They'd be like, "No, we're not watching this anymore," and I would make them watch it over and over and over, and it would just be like best 2 out of 3 series for the 2 best guys in the country at that point. But I remember watching these matches, and I was like, now it's crazy to think about because that footage is like,
Can't find them.
no, it's nowhere.
Yeah.
Do you know about Sheets versus Schultz in '88?
Is it Kevin Sheets maybe? Mike Sheets. Mike Sheets. Yeah.
Versus Mark Schultz. And Sheets was a straight-up badass. He was a 2-time NCAA champion. He is the reason that there is a 15-point tech fall. They didn't have that, and he would beat guys like 50-9, and he'd get on top, and he'd turn you every which way but loose. 1988, so Schultz is defending Olympic champion and defending world champion. Sheets beats him in the final wrestle-off, and it's 1-1. But Schultz is not coming back for match 3. He has quit the sport. That's it. Dave's got to talk him off the ledge. They come back, and the final wrestle-off for Olympics, sadly, at that time, just meant you're on the floor of a high school or a junior high. But this is still where it's at. And Dave has kind of put the word around, like, hey, I don't know if he's coming. So they started the match. Sheets is on the mat, and Mark is not in the building. And they gave you 3. You got 3 calls to the mat, and they started like this clock, and they counted down, and then they signed the bout sheet. So they're doing this process, which I'd really never seen. I'd heard about it in kids wrestling, but I'd never actually seen it played out in front of the world before because nobody had ever not shown up. At any rate, even if you weren't going to wrestle, you showed up to say, I'm not going to wrestle. He doesn't enter the room. So Sheets is on the mat. Sheets is bouncing around, and he's waiting, and the doors open like something out of a movie, and there's like this silhouette that walks through with the sunlight, and it's Mark. And he had walked to the arena from the hotel. That was the warm-up. He had his shoes on, and he had his straps up. And he walked straight onto the mat. And they're on the third call. They've already done that once, and they've done that twice, and they're doing it. The time's ticking down, and he walks on the mat, and that match is on YouTube, and Mark, oh my God, Mark beat him bad.
Dang.
It was like 15 or 16-6. He did not need any more points. It was a 15-point tech fall. He kept scoring just to score. I mean, it was one of the most brutal. It really was. Like, Mark Schultz is a competitor. I think if Cael was to really tell us, but I bet that Cael admired Mark to a certain level at one point in his life.
Well, that would make sense because he was the BYU coach while Coach Cael was growing up in Utah. So I'd be confident that he maybe he got a training session in with him or something like that at some point. But that would be like a fun dream all-time matchup.
Yeah.
Mark Schultz and Coach Cael, both in their prime. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
That'd be great. Chael,
That would be pretty wild.
switching gears just a little bit. Obviously, you've done some boxing fairly recently. What do you think about Conor McGregor facing Logan Paul in Saudi Arabia? What do you think? Do you think this is actually going to happen, or do you think it's just rumors? And
No, what a scam. The whole thing is fraud. First off, it's not Saudi Arabia, it's India.
India.
For some Indian billionaire that wants to bring tourism to the country. India is the most populated country in the world. Many report that it's got even more people than China. Like, it is just so fake. But let me tell you one thing that a rich guy hates. If you're a really rich guy, it actually pains them. It keeps them up at night to not have their fame. A rich guy that rich wants his credit for it. So, and the reason I tell you that is the way Conor tells the story, there's some rich billionaire that's going to cut a check for $250 million. First off, nobody's cutting a check for $250 million when the going rate of the market is $8 million. Yeah. Secondly, he would not be going by the name Rich Indian Billionaire. The entire reason he would be putting on the event to write a check is to get his name out there. It would not be Rich India Billionaire. So I'm just sharing, like, one of the great lies in sport that got told and it got repeated on ESPN and Sports Illustrated, but one of the great lies was the alleged payouts of Floyd Mayweather, none of which were true. And that includes a fight with Conor McGregor where they both got $125 million. That's not true. But one simple follow-up question would kill that dead in its tracks, which is, who wrote the check? If you had a check for $125 million, who signed the bottom of it? Why have we never heard of this guy? Why have we never heard of the company or the entity? Who brought you the check? Did they wire the check? Did they hand it to you? And I'm just sharing for you. When guys write checks for that big, they find a way to make sure the media knows they wrote it. They have somebody film as they hand it to them. It's an entire thing. It's one of the dumbest lies that is not needed to be told, but Conor is now workshopping $250 million to box a non-boxer at a weight class that doesn't exist in a promotion that they've yet to identify for a guy who apparently doesn't have a name. The whole thing is ridiculous. And meanwhile, Tyson Fury is saying that he would like to go do MMA, and he's being laughed at. People are accepting. There's a headline about Conor's BS story he just told, and then right under that, there's one about Tyson Fury's. But Tyson Fury's is actually possible. He, I believe, would fight Francis Ngannou if somebody came up with the money. I believe he'd probably flinch at the last second, but I think there is a discussion to be had, and there is some media to enjoy, and there is a potential press conference to go back and forth. That story got completely dismissed for the Conor versus Logan story, which are both under contract with TKO. Logan on the WWE side and Conor on the UFC side. The whole story is absurd.
Right. Yeah, it's I didn't think about it, but once you break it down like that, it's pretty clear.
Way less exciting.
That's not happening. So that fight's not happening. So what fights are you excited about in the near future that are happening? What are some fights that you got you?
Bo Nickal's next fight, which will reignite the conversation of Bo Nickal versus Khamzat Chimaev. There is nothing I enjoy speaking about more than what would happen with Bo and Chimaev. And I don't just want to talk about the fight or 3 rounds versus 5 rounds. I want the specific takedown. Who's going to go for it? Who's going going to get the other one there? Are they going to go for a double leg? Is it going to be over under? I like that entire argument. Which one is going to get tired first? Which one's going to try the takedown first? Everything about Bo versus Chimaev is exciting for me. Somebody's has got to go. That line never stopped working in sport. And we just don't get to see it in MMA very often because we just don't get guys that make it to a top level and they have such pristine records. So I'm actually interested in that. I'm a little bit annoyed that you haven't been called out by anybody yet, but I am excited for 185. I think that they're doing it the right way. I think Strickland should get in there with Duplessis. And I know sometimes we put business and excitement, but we got to remember to be sport first. It has to be competition first with the right competitors. I think that's the right way to do it. See what happens with Chimaev. And, we were hearing different rumors about him, and even that he was held up with visa issues. I tend to think those are true stories, but now that has freed up, I'd like to get those conversations going again.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's the fight I've been wanting for a long time, and we'll make it happen. I think that it's just like that fight is massive, and it's been talked about since I very first started MMA, and so I feel like the proper circumstance is for the belt. Like, it has to be for the belt in my mind. So
it's seeming like that's the only circumstance. I agree.
Yeah, and so that, like, it changes the timeline a little bit because it's like, well, let's see. If I get into the rankings and he's number whatever, like, we could fight. But I feel like that it's owed to, I think, us as fighters, to the fans, to the MMA community for that to be a world championship fight. And, I can't wait because at the end of the day, for me, the idea is, I want to fight the best guys in the world. It's not, this guy sucks. I'm so much better than everybody. And it's like, that guy's freaking good. He's he's a savage. He's a beast. He's from, the mountains. And guess what, man? I'm from America, and I'm going to come out there and we'll see what we can do. But I believe in my skills. I've proved it against the best of the world in one sport. And now we're going to do it in fighting, which is the ultimate sport. And so for me, the excitement is I'm thinking about that every single day in training, even though I know I'm going to have however many fights in between now and then. That's like the one that motivates me. It's weird because honestly, these last fights, Paul Craig, I was excited for because that's an interesting challenge. But prior to that, I'm like this is part of the process. So I'm not as excited about it. I'm not I don't feel that danger. But that fight with Khamzat, that's where I really feel it. And that's how I know I'm going to perform my best when it comes down to it, because that's what I train every single day to do. And that's what I'm thinking about all the time. So I couldn't agree more.
Did any of you guys happen to see the training footage that just came out on Khamzat? It was like a week ago, but he was with the Russian national team.
Mm-hmm. I did,
Will you admit that he looked a little better than maybe we gave him? Because it looked like they were even going Greco. I mean, he was pushing and he was chest to chest, which is hard to do when he was doing some wrist control. I thought he looked a little sharper than I was aware he was.
No, he's
just pure wrestling.
He's pretty good. Yeah, pure wrestling. I think that, he's got some skills. It's hard to say exactly what they are because what information do we have? We have a short video of him training with good wrestlers. So that's maybe 1% of what's actually going on. So maybe you can extrapolate and say he's doing really well all the time, but maybe not. We have video of him beating up some high school kids in Sweden. So take that for what it is. And then we have video of him throwing down guys in MMA who have never grappled, really at a competitive high world-class level. You have him fighting Gilbert Burns and struggling a little bit with Gilbert Burns. But I do think that he does have skills. Do I think he's a top-level world-class wrestler, a guy that could be, top 3, top 5 in the world? Probably not. Maybe if he trained wrestling full-time, he could. But right now, I don't believe that. I think right now, myself, I know that I'm a top 3 guy in the world. I don't think there's really a guy in the world at 86 kilos that could beat me in wrestling right now. Then I haven't even wrestled in 3.5 years. So, sure. I feel confident in that, but it's hard to say exactly where he's at. I think that he's good. He's got skills, but his biggest thing that's going to crush him, especially against a fight against me, is, dude, you're going to get tired. Like, you're going to go like this, and I'm going to go like this as the fight goes on. And, you know, you're not going to take me down, which is your best attribute. So you're going to have to strike with me. I'm probably going to be able to take you down. Maybe I don't hold you down on the ground forever, but I can hold you down there for a little bit. And the longer the fight goes, the worse it's going to get. So that's kind of my view of it from 30,000 feet, and you know, trying to take all the information that we have and look at it in a realistic perspective.
Yeah, that does come back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, the athlete's biggest fear is exhaustion, and that would be his fear. He would definitely have an anxiety if I come at him hard and fast early, and that energy's not going to hold up.
No.
I would agree. That would be something that would be in their mind, and that's a very hard thing to fix.
Yeah. So here's the difference, you know, between Khamzat and I, because I think we have similar, like, our bodies are kind of similar, and we have, like, obviously a grappling base, so there's similarities. But you look at me when I go out to fight, zero motion, no emotion. I'm competing. I'm here to win. Him, he's charged up. He's screaming. He's yelling. He's coming out. And a lot of MMA fans nowadays look at that and they're like, that's the way to do it. That's aggressive. And, you know, that's the guy that's going to win. But guess what? If you're going to fight and beat the guys that are the best in the world, you got to do it with your brain, because we're all strong. We all have skills. We're all talented, and we all train hard. But what separates us is I have no emotion going out to compete, and I compete smart. He goes 100% from the jump. Yeah. And I think that's allowed him to, like, have these highlights and to throw a guy down like Robert Whittaker and choke him out. But me and Robert Whittaker are two different. That's not the same. That's not the same thing. Yeah. He's not doing that to me. There's zero chance. I guarantee you there's 0.000% chance that he's ever going to do that to me.
Yeah, I mean, Usman showed a good foreshadowing.
And he doesn't even wrestle.
And it was just, if you can get past that initial jolt, which he can't help. He has to do that at first, but I thought he challenged them well in that area.
And Anthony, I've tried to argue that with people when they argue about Bo. It's like, it's always who can take who down, but sometimes I will concede that point and say he can have the takedown, which you're misunderstanding. He's not going to keep him there.
No.
That's the whole part that, like, throws everybody. Like, they think Bo's going to go down and he's going to be on his guard. It's like, no, he's going to get back up.
Yeah.
You got to be sure Chimaev can take him down, but to win this argument, you got to be sure he can take Bo down 3-1. You have to take him down, and take him down to get as much time on top as Bo will need with one takedown. That's what the part of the argument that I feel people miss.
For sure.
And we spend our whole lives getting up. Whereas internationally, you never train that.
And I love that he's training with the Russian national wrestling team. That's amazing. And guess what, man? I'm training with the United States world team and Olympic team, and I'm training with the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, and I'm training with Penn State wrestling team. You know, every day since I've got back from this fight, I'm in the wrestling room. You know, I'm in the Penn State wrestling room training. I'm wrestling Carter Strachey. I'm wrestling Aaron Brooks. I'm wrestling Josh Barr. You know, I'm wrestling Greg Kirkfleet. These are the best guys in the world at wrestling, you know, and it's not so that's something that I think, you know, you kind of brought this up about my last fight. It's like, oh, you see how many wrestlers go in and, you know, start striking, get in love with the hands, and now they're a boxer, they're a striker. It happens all the time. You know, Justin Gaethje is a prime example. There's tons of other guys like that have a wrestling background and now only strike, and that's because they don't train wrestling, right? For me, I'm day in, day out wrestling the best guys in the world. That's a huge part of my routine, so I'm never going to lose that. Like, I still know, like I said, that I think I'm probably the best 86-kilo wrestler on the planet right now, and that just, you know, doesn't go away because I'm still doing it every day.
If Carter wins his 5th championship and Gable Steveson wins this year's championship, are they going to do the right thing and give OW or Hodge to Carter? Or as long as Gable wins his championship, he takes all the prizes, right?
No, they'll give it to Carter. They're going to do the right thing. I think they will.
Because of 5.
I think because of 5, and it's just historic. It's the right thing to do. And a big part of the vote is now past Hodge winners, which the last 12 years, it's been a lot of Penn State. So, and then Coach Cael's got 4 of them. So we have a significant percentage of the vote at this point.
Wait a minute. I actually didn't know this. So to be able to vote on the Hodge, it's not just the media anymore. It's now prior Hodge winners.
Correct.
They both factor in, right?
Yeah, they both factor in.
That is very interesting.
What?
Yeah,
I
so
did not know that.
the media vote is part of it, but a big part of it is prior Hodge winners. Yeah.
That's cool.
And who decides this media vote? I'm trying to get my vote here. And
I have no idea.
Who do you got to go to get a vote?
I think it should just be up to you, to be honest. You know, it seemed, hearing you talk about wrestling history and stuff like that, I would put you up again in a wrestling Jeopardy contest against any media member.
It'd be very objective.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, it really
100%.
Hey,
I think
know who was a killer back in the day? You were talking about watching those old tapes. You want to know who was a straight-up killer? And it was that same Dave Schultz, Kenny Monday. There was another one that slipped in. You know who I'm thinking?
I mean, I
Rob
have
Cole.
Rob Cole. Rob Cole's State College High.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rob Cole made the team one of those years, and Dave wasn't wrestling, but Cole beat Monday. It was a big deal. I believe it was 1991.
Yeah, that's
Rob
right.
Cole
He was in there with those guys.
with those guys.
I forgot about that. No, yeah. So you probably don't know this right now. Maybe you do, but my dad he retired from coaching wrestling, and he recently got back in, and he's coaching State College High. So he's coaching the high school where Penn State is, and that's where Rob Cole went. And Rob's dad was the coach at Penn State, so Rob grew up here, and he had Rob Cole come do a coach's seminar for him 2 months ago, maybe.
I did know that your dad got back in. I did know that. You want to know a match that I saw? This is going to blow your mind. You specifically, Bo. I know you're going to want to hear about this. I watched in person Pat Smith after he'd won 4. It was his first National Open after he won 4 in the finals versus Dave Schultz.
Wow. That's a big match.
There.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
I was at this match, and I was behind Dave in the hallway. I'm with my mom. We're for the high school division, and so we're walking over. We end up behind Dave, and I tell my mom, like, just slow down. This is Dave Schultz. And we just stayed behind him for, a few minutes and just eavesdropped on what he was saying. And somebody asked him, and he was in his full singlet. He had his full singlet with his shoes, and he had the Foxcatcher shirt with underneath, but with the straps up. So when it was time to wrestle, he just pulled the shirt off, and I just thought that was funny that those dudes walked around in their wrestling singlets. I just thought that was funny. We're in Las Vegas. We're in Las Vegas. It's 100 degrees outside. These guys are walking through like attractions, and I can't figure out why people are staring at them. I heard somebody say to him, are you going to win tonight? They asked him that. And it was a fellow wrestler. It was a coach or from the community. They said, are you going to win tonight? To Dave. And I did not realize that Dave had Pat. Like, prior to the internet, you could be at a tournament like I was and not know.
Right.
So, I mean, the finals would come around, and that's when you found out who was in the finals. I didn't know he had Pat. And Dave was 36 years old.
Wow.
He had just come out of retirement. And he paused when they asked him. And he thought about it. And then he shook his head, and he said, yeah. And then I got there, and it was Pat Smith.
Yeah.
And he beat him. Dave beat him.
What a legend.
It's a crazy match.
No, his style was so fun to watch because you could tell he was as strong as it comes for his weight. Like, he had the strength, but he didn't really have like the speed or the athleticism. Like, he looked like a good wrestling athlete, but not really a good athlete. So then he'd wrestle a guy like Kenny Monday or a guy like Nate Carr, and it was like so crazy, that clash. But it was so exciting as well because Dave just had every trick in the book. Like, he just knew how to wrestle when it came down to it. Like, that's why he was as good as he was. It was because he knew wrestling. He knew what the sport, knew how to impose his will, and he knew the sport.
He eventually got Carr down. By the way, by the time that feud was over, he started to pull away. But I know exactly what you mean by using Carr and Kenny Monday. Like, they would just explode, and all of a sudden they'd have 3 points.
Yeah, well, even his brother Mark was like so.
And it's good for 4 points. No, I know exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, he just didn't have that like explosiveness, but you could, and he was slow. He would move so slow when he would come out there. It was like it was crazy. You've ever watched his matches?
Yeah, a couple.
Yeah.
So hairy.
So hairy. He looked like a gorilla out there.
He was a big believer, which still to this day is disputed, but that your lead leg, and he would compare it to a boxer. He would say the same way a boxer throws a jab and that's his main hand, he would say your lead leg hand is the one that you should be reaching with. which the majority of wrestling says no. That protects and you reach with your rear leg. But he believed it was a huge part of his philosophy. I listened to Brandon Slade do a whole piece on this, but it was a big deal that Dave said you grab the guy and you reach with this leg and then be aware. If the guy changes elevation, you got to be aware that he's coming for that leg. But it was just part of his belief patterns. And they weren't all foolproof, but they were his, and he believed them, and he turned that into world and Olympic medals.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, he used to I heard stories, people tell me he used to get up and train and run at 4 a.m., you know, in the middle of the night when because he knew that was when the Russians were training. So he would do his regular day of training, and then he would get up in the middle of the night and train as well because he knew the Russians were training at that point.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I believe it. Kurt Angle used to do that, but this was Kurt's hero. My favorite Dave story was Olympic Training Center, and these guys had gone out. They'd gone out and they were having a good time and they were headed back, and they run into Dave. And so they're passing Dave. He's out on the street doing a run. So they're like, you know, they give him the old honk and the wave. So he just takes off like a bullet after him. And they're like, oh, he wants to race. They speed up, and then they hit this red light. And they're like, oh, come on, light, turn. And Dave's getting close, and the light turns green. And they speed up, and then they got to take a turn. And then there's another red light, and Dave's coming after him. And they finally get back to the parking lot, and Dave goes, what are you doing? I was trying to get a ride. We'll never know or not. I didn't know the man. I just know of the man. But I love stories like that.
Yeah.
You love it. Yeah. Wrestling. You said this before as well, but wrestling is just a different type of person. Yeah. And people that have done that sport from a young age, it's just like different people, amazing people, some of the best people. But Chael, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for chatting with us. This is great. You guys have
been trying to get me out of here. And I appreciate the man of the house in the sports coat with no socks on. That's just no, I really appreciate that. I can't believe Tony Two-Face. I'm actually very excited about that. And Bo, I will always be in your corner whether I'm screaming at the camera or not. I'm screaming because I care. Believe that or don't. Goodbye to all of you.
Thank you, Chael.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.